Welcome to Module 1, Understanding Your Target Market, and this is Video 2, Identifying Your Ideal Client. So here's what we're going to cover today: the importance of defining your ideal client, and the 5 ways on how to define and identify your ideal client. Let's make one thing certain. When you are looking for your ideal client, it's not AWOP, meaning anyone with a pulse or anyone that can fog up a mirror. That's the old style of getting clients, and you should never be in that position where you're just looking for any client, no matter what they are and who they are, because that is a recipe for disaster in the long term, because you're going to end up with either clients that you don't like working with or they're really just inappropriate to be part of your practice. They could actually be costing you money instead of making you money. So we need to go after an ideal client. So what is that definition of an ideal client? One, it's someone that can be described who actually wants to hire you and work with you, but they also have to have the means to do so as well. They have to be appropriate. So somebody who has no money and no ability to pay you is obviously not your ideal client, even if they wanted to work with you. Now, there are many ways to define an ideal client. So here's 8 of them that we're going to go through. One, they share financial goals and objectives. I cannot tell you how frustrating it was dealing with clients that simply just didn't give you all the information. It's very much impossible as a financial advisor to be giving proper financial advice if we don't have all the information. Financial capacity. Do they have the assets and the income levels to make sense for your strategies to work? Relationship potential. Relationships are built on trust, communication, and mutual respect. Again, very frustrating to be dealing with clients that don't respond to your emails, or if you have questions regarding the KYC and they're not responding back. That could also be a compliance issue as well. Communication types, personalities, working preferences, willingness to follow advice. Again, I can give you all kinds of examples of someone that I would consolidate all their debt and put it all into their mortgage, and now they have all this cash flow, and then a year later you come back and guess what? Their credit cards are maxed out again. They have all kinds of loans, and they're just as big a mess as they were a year ago. Again, a very frustrating thing for advisors to go through. Transparency, allows the advisor to provide tailored recommendations and strategies. So what I mean by that is the transparency of full disclosure of they have X amount of dollars or they have X amount of debt. Again, it's very difficult to do your job or do your job properly if you don't have all the information. Number 7 is a big one: respect for the advisor's expertise. So there are some clients out there that at the end of the day, you can be giving this advice, but they either don't follow it or they don't take you seriously. And again, it's not a very good situation for the advisor. And of course, referral potential. So, what kind of networks do they have, influence or connections? I can tell you from my own personal experience, there were situations where I took on smaller value clients because they were a very good referral source. And on the flip side, there were other clients that had a lot of assets that I didn't take on or I had to fire simply because it just wasn't a good fit for my practice. So why does it even matter for financial advisors to have an ideal client? At the end of the day, as an advisor, you have a certain level of expertise that you can offer to your clients. At the same time, your client has needs, and your expertise and their needs have to mesh. Otherwise, it really doesn't make sense to move forward. So, perfect example, somebody has lots of assets, which may look good for you in the sense that it's a good prospect to have or a good client to have. But if that client doesn't invest in anything that you can offer, then at the end of the day, who cares if they have $1 million or $2 million? If you have no ability to help them, then it still is not a good fit, regardless of how much money they have. Now I'm going to pass this over to Andy. Andy, can you give some insights on the demographics?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the main point here is you're not going to have much effectiveness with your arrow if you don't know the target you're aiming at. So by understanding these following factors that we're going to discuss, you can better tailor your services, refine your marketing strategies, and ultimately attract the right audience. So let's dive in here with the demographic factors. As we have on the screen here, those entail age, income level, occupation, and marital status. Ermos, maybe you would take this over and I'll elaborate a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at the end of the day, you want to narrow down your target audience so that you can tailor your services to those specific needs and, more importantly, the actual pain points. So if you have certain strategies that are directly relevant to married couples, then clearly single people will not benefit from those strategies. So you have to target market married people in this instance. The geographic location, you know what? That might be less of an issue these days now with Zoom and technology. I know many advisors that are licensed in many different provinces and many different states, but in some cases, it does make sense to narrow your geographic location because some people like to have face-to-face meetings, including advisors. So an example of a demographic factor would be married dentists that live in whichever city that you're looking for that are 5 to 10 years away from retirement. Like that would be a really good example of a defined ideal client. The second one is psychographic insights or lifestyle preferences and values. So what are their interests? What are their values? What are their choices they do in life? So you need to better understand your ideal clients and what motivates them and effectively what their financial goals are. Also, their behavior patterns. So how do your ideal clients make financial decisions? Where do they get their advice from? What is their risk tolerance? What is their preferred mode of communication when it comes to the back and forth with yourself and your client? An example of this would be maybe it's a church-going couple or a church-going family that wants to work with a financial advisor face-to-face and not necessarily over Zoom. Is there anything you want to add, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, this really comes down to exploring the interest and value of your ideal clients. Like, what are their passions? What do they prioritize in life, right? So suppose you have an ideal client, your ideal client values sustainability and ethical investments. Well, understanding this is going to allow you to tailor investment strategies that align with their values, such as socially responsible investing, right? As well as talking about lifestyle choices. They play a significant role in financial planning, considering factors like career aspirations, family dynamics, and spending habits. When it comes to behavioral patterns, you really want to analyze how your ideal client make financial decisions. What is their risk tolerance? How do they refer to receive information, which we're going to elaborate a little bit more. But a good example there too, adding on to Ermos, is if your ideal client tends to be risk adverse, you may emphasize low risk investment options, provide detailed analysis to reassure them, and really just understand their preferred communication channels and things like that, which falls under that behavioral pattern. But the conclusion really to this section at a high level is identifying your ideal client profile goes beyond just the demographics. It's about understanding, as I said, lifestyle preferences, value, and behavioral patterns. But by aligning your services with these factors, you can better meet your clients' needs and build long-lasting relationships based on trust and understanding.
Okay, next one is financial needs and objectives. So what are their short-term and long-term financial goals? Really understanding what their aspirations are. For instance, retirement planning or saving for education, or it could be wealth preservation. And once you understand what those objectives are, then and only then can you offer those relevant solutions. Pain points. Quite often advisors will try to really solve for goals when they really should be solving for pain points. So you have to be able to ask the right questions and identify specific pain points that your ideal clients face, which could be debt management, tax optimization, or tax savings, if they're worried about having their money in the stock market. And you want to really position yourself as a valuable resource to your ideal client. An example of this would be maybe parents that are concerned about the affordability of university for their kids. So sometimes the goals themselves or the pain points themselves is not for themselves, but it could be for somebody else within their family. But unless you're asking the right questions, you simply won't know that until you ask those proper questions. Andy?
Yeah, for sure. If I can use a different example, like a dentist where I'm going to tie those two things together. So short-term, long-term financial goals. Imagine you might have a dentist client who's nearing retirement. Their primary goal might be ensuring they have enough savings to maintain their desired lifestyle throughout retirement, while also potentially transitioning out of their practice smoothly. On the other hand, consider a younger dentist who's focused on building wealth for the future, expanding their practice and managing both their personal and professional finances. On the pain point side, let's take debt management, for example, for that younger, for instance, many dentists struggle with managing student loan debt from dental school while also trying to invest in their practice and plan for their future. So as financial advisors, we can offer tailored solutions to help that dentist navigate not just their goals and their current situations, but those pain points and challenges. And obviously another big one for some professionals like a dentist would be tax optimization, which they may not even be aware is a pain point or a problem. So once again, understanding your ideal client profile really involves gaining that insights into their goals, aspirations, pain points, and challenges.
All
And
right.
most
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go to the fourth one, which is communication, and that's a big one. And this is something that I've taught a lot of advisors. So I can give you my perspective. Um, if someone calls me, there's a very small chance that I'll even pick up the phone, to be quite honest. I'm just not a phone guy. But if you text me, I could be in the middle of a meeting and I could respond to your text. So you really need to figure out what is your ideal client's preferred communication channel. How do they prefer to receive information and really communicate with you? Some might like email, some like phone calls. A lot of people like in-person meetings, or could be videos or even texts. And the frequency of communication is important as well. So how often do they expect to hear from you? Because it may not be what you think. How they prefer to stay informed about their financial matters. I can only let you know that you should never assume anything. And I can give you a perfect example in my own personal practice. Back in the day, I got my first $1 million client. So of course, in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to service the heck out of this guy. So I'm like, yeah, I'm going to call you like every single month, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And he's just looking at me like I'm crazy. And so I had to ask him, is this enough? Is this what you want? And he goes, you know what? One meeting a year and the occasional phone call is all I really need. So I kind of put the thought that the more money they have, that somehow they would need more and more servicing. But that wasn't the case. In fact, it was the exact opposite. So it's best to ask the question of what their expectation is, because sometimes one meeting per year is plenty. Some people uh, want more than quarterly reviews. So if your expectation is you have no intention of ever meeting somebody more than twice or 3 times or 4 times, yet their expectation is somehow they want a review meeting every single month, you need to know that up front. Otherwise, this is going to cause problems later on. So I know in most cases, if you have monthly emails that go out and a couple of calls and a couple of review meetings, that is usually the maximum that any advisor should be doing for their client. But again, that is really up to you. Andy?
Yeah, I think the key word that we've mentioned in here is expectations. Find out what those expectations are in terms of frequency of communication, right? A younger client who's actively building their wealth and seeking guidance and investment opportunities, they may appreciate frequent updates on market trends and being in your newsletter and things like that. Whereas somebody that is older may only appreciate periodic reviews and assessments, and really by respecting their preferences for whatever type of contact they want, you're going to maintain a positive relationship, really built on trust, respect, and understanding. Some examples of questions that you can ask really in a friendly conversational way is just, hey there, how do you typically like to stay in touch regarding your finances? Are you more of a phone person, or do you prefer emails and digital updates? When it comes to discussing your financial goals and progress, what's the best way for us to connect? Are you comfortable with X, Y, and Z type of platforms, Zoom call, phone call, whatever? So really have those questions in your mind of what likely would be what an ideal client profile would like, or your ideal client would like, right? And lastly, do you have any specific preferences or concerns about communication that you'd like me to keep in mind as we work together? Now, obviously, this is a preemptive thought in your head and not necessarily what you're saying to yourself, but these are the type of questions that should come up when you have those discussions, because identifying these channels and frequency, really we can tailor our approach to meet that individual's needs, enhance the client experience, and ultimately drive better outcomes for our practice and our clients' financial well-being.
Awesome. Yeah, number 5 is relationship compatibility. So do your values align with your clients, right? Because at the end of the day, you really want that strong, trusting advisor-client relationship, and that could be along the lines of either risk tolerance, their ethical investing. So Andy brought that up before, and on our side, it's fee transparency. I mean, I can tell you stories of some advisors that lost their clients not because they did anything wrong, but they just failed to disclose the fees. So there was this understanding that the or the client was paying X amount of fees, but the reality was it was actually much higher. And because the client found out later that was the case, he felt that his advisor might have been hiding the fact that the fees that they were paying were actually higher. Although the reality was they just didn't communicate it, but the client didn't really care, or ex-client in this scenario. And of course, it's also compatibility with your expertise and what services that you offer. So for instance, like, do your skills, expertise, and service offerings meet the needs and preferences of your ideal client? And, me dealing with literally hundreds of advisors, some do insurance only, some do investments only, and some do full financial planning. But the reality is this, and I know it happens, if someone is an insurance only advisor, they will typically push for insurance based solutions. And not to pick on the insurance only advisors out there, because I've seen also investment only advisors that every solution they have revolves around investments only. The reality is, to be fair to the client, if there's a solution which is outside of your scope, you absolutely owe it to your client to provide some sort of solution that doesn't include you. So for instance, if you are an investment only advisor and there's an insurance need, you really should refer that client to an insurance advisor so they can provide the proper coverage. Andy?
Yeah, and so I think that the takeaway that we'd like you to have here is we're giving these ideas and philosophies about engaging with clients, but at this stage of the game, we're trying to help you identify who you'd ideally work with. So take a look at the type of clients who you've enjoyed working with the most and the value and service you provided them. Is this your ideal client? Well, if yes, then you're already ahead of the game here. Simply write down those characteristics that you've identified from those aforementioned categories, and that will help you define who is it that you really want to speak to. In other words, who is your ideal client? And the more focused and narrow down you can get that, the more you can really pinpoint your activities. Here's a pro tip for you. Ask your existing clients why they liked working with you, or why they like working with you, or why would they recommend you to somebody else that is similar to them. That's the great place to start.
Agreed. And this ends module 1, understanding your target market. Video 2 is now completed. And up next is video 3, how to create your ideal client profile.